How will the Knicks defend Cade Cunningham? Can Jalen Brunson cut down on the hero ball, or will that be an issue? And can Karl-Anthony Towns put his stamp on the Pistons series? We're going into Gavin's three things to look out for in the Pistons series today on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolfe. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And he's Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and your favorite pontificator today, as well as the Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. And we want to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. On today's episode, we're going to do the first of a two-part series where we're each going to give three things that we're looking out for in this Pistons series. We made sure not to overlap at all, so there won't be any repeat things, even though I'm sure we have some similar thoughts on multiple items going into this series. But today we'll be going through Gavin's three things, which includes how the Knicks can deal with Cade Cunningham, how they can get a little more creative potentially with Jalen Brunson and with the team offense as a whole. And maybe in that same vein, how they can potentially have Karl-Anthony Towns take over this series, which could potentially be a game changer for the Knicks. But if all that's not enough for you and you still want more after this, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Knicks Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. And if just, supporting us and hearing from us isn't enough, you also get a chance right now to win either a $2,500 Best Buy gift card, a $300 Game Time gift card, or a $200 Fanatics gift card if you subscribe anytime between now and April 30th to the Locked On Knicks Daily newsletter. So again, check that out at LockedOnDaily.com. So check that out and sign up for the Locked On Knicks newsletter. You could potentially win a whole bunch of gift cards. All right, Gavin, I'll toss the floor to you. What is the first thing that you are looking out for in this Knicks Pistons series?
Yeah, I think the single factor that will most define this series, how the Knicks guard Cade Cunningham, because in the regular season, maybe some of you saw, they did not do a good job of that at all. Cade in 4 games against the Knicks, 31 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists a game, 56% from the field, 52% from 3, 80% from the line. That was not just like a 52% from 3 where he shot a couple of them. He was 13 to 25. He had a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He absolutely tore this Knicks defense a new one every time they saw him. And I think what is scary, if you are a Knicks fan, presumably you are, if you're watching this podcast for the most part, is that the Knicks tried a bunch of different stuff, right? They had Mikal on him. They had OG on him. There were possessions where Josh Hart was guarding him. We just watched a game where Deuce McBride was playing him for the majority of that fourth matchup against the Pistons. The Knicks had Cat drop. The Knicks had Cat at the level. The Knicks blitzed him with 2 guys. And we saw Cade just systemically torch each and every one of those coverages and each and every one of those players. So I come into this series and say, there's not really an obvious answer. I would say the closest thing on the roster to an obvious answer is you got OG Anunoby because he's one of the best wing defenders in the NBA, and he's 6'8" and really strong and moves his feet and is really smart and has great instincts and has great hands. You got him specifically to guard someone like Cade Cunningham. The issues I see with that is, one, Cade was pretty good against him. He cooked him in that third game, and I think part of it was that he got a lot of confidence and he got into a really good rhythm against Mikal Bridges. We could also note that OG maybe wasn't playing as well earlier in the year as he is to end the season on the defensive end of the floor. We just watched him give Jason Tatum a hell of a tough time, and I think we'd agree as exceptional as Cade is, Jason Tatum is an even better player. But the Pistons are obviously just going to get into pick and roll, And the onus is going to be on Cat unless OG can just completely blow up screen after screen. And when you have a screener as good as Isaiah Stewart setting some of those, and even Jalen Duren, who at least as far as I've seen is solid in his own right, like even if OG is the primary matchup, I don't know how much time OG actually gets to shut down Cade specifically. I do think, though, he has a better chance of navigating those screens than Mikal Bridges, who, Alex, we've seen in fits and spurts really, really struggle in that category that he's supposed to be absolutely elite in. And my question with Mikal, if he's the one who gets the matchup because you're trying to have OG back protecting that back line, like can he rise to another level? Like I think we've seen in small flashes this year, he's had games where he's absolutely locked up Trae Young, like short stretches against someone like Shaedon Sharpe, who's a great athlete, and like Mikal just put him in jail. Even SGA that first game, I thought Mikal played like about as good defense as you can play on SGA. Like we've seen when the stakes are the highest at times, Mikal really rises to the occasion. We've also seen big games in big moments, most recently against the Cleveland Cavaliers, where he completely falters. The effort is questionable, and he just looks really, really weak navigating screens. Like even that third Pistons game where Cade absolutely cooked, Mikal got off to a good start. Cade started that game just 2 for 7, but from there he sort of fell apart. And again, the fly in the ointment of all of this is like once Karl-Anthony Towns is on an island, like we've seen him at the level, like and Cade just have a quick crossover and get right by him. We've seen him in drop, and Cade just rains 3 after 3 after 3. And it almost gets you to a point where you're like, all right, do you want to just like let Cade get his and like rely on no one else on this Pistons team beating you and thinking you can outscore them? I don't know. I have a few more thoughts on this, but for the sake of me not talking for 8 minutes, what do you think about everything I said? And what do you think about this matchup with Cade Cunningham?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one big truth that you can count on with this Pistons team is that Cade is going to soak up a ton of usage, right? So 33% usage for the year. That's just crazy. I mean, there's a reason why I know you've been beating the drum for him to potentially be like get some MVP votes and be probably he's definitely going to be an all NBAer, whether that's a first team or second team or whatever. I mean, he had a phenomenal year and like deserves whatever accolades he's going to get. That said, he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, and that a lot of plays are going to either end with him trying to drive and kick to someone and get an assist, or try to get his own. I think the big thing to me is just going to be diversifying how you defend him and not tasking one player with it for the entire game, right? Like what you described, I feel like with Bridges, it kind of comes down to like the guy has his limits, I think. I think that he can, for a large part of a game, be good at screen navigating and, sticking with a guy and everything else. But there's only so long that you can like do that before, especially with Mikal Bridges' build, you start getting kind of worn down throughout a game. Like he's not like a huge bulky dude. Like if he's just continually running into like Jalen Duren over and over again, he's going to have a rough day. So I think the key to me is going to be diversifying who's on Cade at any point of the game and switching between Mikal, between OG, between Josh Hart, even, and making, because Josh has the strength to keep up with him, even if not like the crazy length or whatever. Like he can definitely take a hit from Cade, who's going to want to try to get inside and try to put a bump on some guys and finish on the inside because he's a big, strong player. I think that would be my way to approach it if I'm Tibbs and the Knicks is don't just make it one person's job. Like this is going to have to take a village to defend Cade. I think they're going to have to get a little more creative than they usually do, which is, I mean, Tibbs loves to kind of just like in his ideal world, unless things are going super poorly, he will a lot of times just kind of leave one guy on their assignment for the entire game and say, that's your job. Go defend that guy. I don't think that I just don't think it's tenable against a guy like Cade, who's going to come at you relentlessly the entire game, who's going to have the ball in his hands for, or is going to be involved in the play 1/3 of the time that the Pistons are touching the ball, whether he's trying to score the ball or whether he's trying to dish it to someone else. He's going to be involved in it some way or another 1/3 of the time. It's not proportionate to have one player try to tackle that matchup. So I think what they're going to have to do is throw different looks at him, make him adjust how he's playing based off who's defending him, and also not be afraid to switch on to him too. I mean, I think that's going to be part of it. Like, I think we've seen Cat, for all of his flaws, I think that, on defense, especially as a rim defender, I think against players of Cade's ilk this year, he's actually done pretty well if he gets switched onto them on the perimeter. and has to just kind of keep them at bay for one possession. Like, I think he's capable of doing that. So, trusting him to be able to do that. And maybe the one weak link here is if they start forcing switches of Brunson, then things get a little more sticky. But then maybe you can, get a little more creative with sending doubles and trying to force the passes one way or another, where you have really good ball hawking defenders in OG, Mikal, and Josh Hart, who can get a hand in there, start a transition opportunity potentially. Maybe a little foreshadowing for what I'd like to talk about for my first thing tomorrow. But I think that's how I would kind of go about approaching it.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think it's a valid point. Like, and because even with like if you're going to switch Cat, like that can't be. And I think I've referenced it as something that could be like an extensive solution. Like Cat has been just incredibly foul prone in his playoff career, and like historically, I think before last season, like could not get through like a decent chunk of games in a series, like playing more than 30 minutes and not fouling out. Like to some extent, like even if he holds up, like it's a recipe for disaster, because we saw like the foul and the 3-pointer he had against like at the end of the Pistons game. He's gonna have a share of stupid fouls, but if you're on Cade, like there are just gonna be some forced fouls, like where he just beats you and like on instinct you slap his arm, and like if there's no rim protection behind Cat, like you can get into a lot of trouble with that. Which is why I think maybe the single biggest thing I'll note in guarding Cade is I think this is a big series for Mitchell Robinson. I think this is ideally a big series to play big and have both of them out there simultaneously. If you have Mitch, you can play drop defense, because Mitch is the antithesis of Cat in that respect. Mitch is absolutely like a top 5 to 8 drop big defensively in the NBA. And like as much as he's still acclimating in some ways coming back, I think that's one area where he's pretty much been Mitchell Robinson, especially when it's him and OG. We saw them neuter that 2-man game between Jason Tatum and Luke Cornett a couple different times against the Boston Celtics. Like I think Mitch can very much hold up. I think he understands positioning much better than Cat. You're gonna have far less possessions where he's just sinking way too far down, and Cade just gets to dribble into a walk up, toe the line 3-pointer. And then the other great part of that is even if they still try to have Cat in the pick and roll, and they're just say, all right, like Mitch is guarding Duran, we're just gonna have Asar Thompson set the screen because Cat's hiding on him. Like at least you have Mitch for backline rim protection. If you then say, all right, we're gonna blitz with Cat and Mitch can rotate over, and if Asar Thompson's open for a corner 3, like so be it. So I think you lean into Mitch. You also have better rebounding. You give them less opportunities. You can play a little bit slower, and you can dominate the offensive glass, and you can ensure Cade gets less opportunities. So I see a lot of advantages to that. And I think Detroit is going to relentlessly, because they did this a bunch of different times, try to put Jalen Brunson in the action on top of put Cat in the action, and like run a screen just to get Brunson switched onto Cat, or Brunson switched onto whoever they want to set the screen with, and get him involved. Like the Knicks are going to have to find ways to scramble out of that. My main thesis here is like, I think it's a little too much to ask if you have Brunson and Cat on the floor without Mitch. And we've only seen Brunson, Mitch, and Cat together for 2 minutes this entire season. So I'm hoping that is maybe quintupled in the very first game of the series. But Alex, next, I want to get into some Jalen Brunson hero ball. So let's talk about that in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks.
But first, I'm going to let you know about our friends over at Hungry Root. And spring is here, and life is busier than ever, especially if you're a daily podcast host during the playoffs. Between work, family, and everything in between, who has time for grocery shopping and meal prep? That's why I use Hungry Root. It makes eating healthy, delicious meals simple and stress-free. Hungry Root is like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist wrapped into one. They take care of grocery shopping and meal planning, offering personalized recommendations based on your tastes and health goals. I love how Hungry Root tailors my orders based on what I liked or didn't like. It gets smarter every time. And with their high quality, nutritious food, you could stick to your gut friendly, high protein diet without spending hours planning. So take advantage of this exclusive deal. Get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. That's a lot of items. Go to hungryroot.com/lockedonnba and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA for 40% off and a lifetime free item. All right, Gavin, we're back in, and I'm eagerly awaiting hearing what your second big thing is that you're looking out for, and why it involves Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, so I'm very curious to see how Jalen Brunson looks in this series. Again, Knicks fans, you might be familiar. He was he was put into multiple graphics with Michael Jordan based off his playoff performance a year ago, right? Like one of the 5 best playoff scorers in the NBA, and I don't think he's fifth on that list. He has been incredible for 2 years now in the playoffs on the Knicks without a lot of help. I think the difference with this year's team is he does have a lot of help, and to get to the ceiling of this year's group that I don't think is going to be as good defensively as playoff groups of Knicks years past, you are going to have to get off the ball and be a little bit more of a point guard than a shooting guard in a point guard's body. And I think what's been fascinating, Alex, since Jalen Brunson came back from injury is he looked a lot better in the first 2 games than in the last 2 games in that respect. Like against the Suns, like he was very content to set up OG Anunoby and get OG Anunoby an advantage and say, hey, I don't really have it tonight. And then he came along and hit the big 3 that ultimately sealed the game. Against the Celtics, like, and I know in overtime they struggled a little bit, but end of regulation, made every big shot, right? Attacking Peyton Pritchard for layups, for elbow jumpers, but also, like, when he was blitzed, he said, hey, Mikal Bridges, like, pop to the 3-point line. I'm going to get it to you. I'm going to get you an open elbow jumper. And the degree to which he can empower Mikal, empower OG, lean into pick and roll with Cat at the end of these games, right? Like, I don't know who Detroit is going to close with, but I really don't think Jalen Duren, and we're going to talk about this third segment, so I don't want to spoil it, but I don't think Jalen Duren has much of a chance in that match with Karl-Anthony Towns. I think the Knicks can go at that over and over and over again, run, pick, and pop, right? Get that 3-point rate up for Cat. I think if Brunson leans into being a point guard first and empowering all these guys to be successful, and then mixes in the big shot making instead of what we saw the last 2 games from him, where he tried to be the hero, and it was very similar to early season Brunson, where the Knicks were super inefficient at the end of games. It was because Brunson, again, like, played hero ball and tried to go 1-on-4, 1-and-5, which this Knicks team, like, he can do it and he can be great at it. He's having one of the best clutch seasons in recent NBA history. But I think against a great defense that's completely locked in, I just don't think it works game after game after game. But I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I wonder if those last couple games were more just about him trying to get himself going and feel like he was comfortable for the playoffs. Like, I don't know, there was something that just felt oddly off about those last few games to me, like, where it did almost feel like they were just kind of like trying to, like, get certain guys going and didn't really care so much about the win or the loss. Like, especially that Cavs game, it just felt like at a certain point they just didn't really care anymore. And even the Pistons game to a certain degree, like, I don't know, it to me at least felt like the motivation was more to kind of get Brunson going and make him feel like he's back in, like, 35 point per game playoff Brunson form again. To your point, maybe they should have been focusing a little more on trying to get some of the other guys involved and make sure that the offense is humming. Maybe they have some ideas that they're working on in practice this week. Who knows? I don't know. Until I see it, I never know, like, how much to trust Tibbs making, like, sweeping adjustments, especially before the playoffs after he spent an entire, regular season doing something one way. I feel like we don't often see him throw big changes at the wall. So I'll be really curious to see, like, what everybody else's involvement is outside of Brunson once we hit this playoff series. It's nice to know that you have him to lean back on, but I'm with you. Like, and I'm going to kind of touch on this and when I give my 3 things too, but I think that, like, leaning on some of the other guys on this team to generate offense and to, like, set up the offense a bit, not only gives you the ability to have other guys have their hands on the ball and feel more comfortable if you need them to make a big shot later on, but it also just puts Jalen Brunson in a position where he's traditionally been good for his career. Like, better, most players do get better if they shoot spot up threes versus pull up threes, but Brunson, it's like pretty demonstrable for his career. Like, it's usually like 37 or so percent. At least, like, in recent memory, it's usually like 37% from pull up threes and like 43% on spot up threes. Like, he becomes way more efficient on those shots. And we sort of saw that even play out the other day in the Cavs game. Like, he got a number of spot up threes and he made good on them. Like, that's something you should be looking for with him, whether that's having Mikal handle the ball a little more, having Josh Hart, run a pick and roll, pick and pop with Cat or something like that, and have Brunson actually hang out off ball, which could work really well. Even doing that with Mikal too. Like, I think that there's ways to have other guys bring the ball down or get handed the ball early in the shot clock, work a little with Cat between them, and then have Brunson kind of float off ball, save his energy for later. And you still have plenty of opportunities to get Brunson in a rhythm, but I do hope that they're willing to kind of forego having Brunson shoot like 35 shots in a game
Yeah.
sometimes in favor of trying to get other guys involved, because I do think we didn't even touch on OG Anunoby, who had the March and April that he had, but like there are other guys on this team that can absolutely step up and score, pass the ball, keep things moving, and this team is kind of always at its best when they're moving more and trying to get everybody involved. So hopefully that's a core tenet going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and look, and Brunson's been very good against the Pistons this year, right? 28 points, 8 assists, 3 rebounds, and that's, to your point, counting that last game where I made a big deal out of it just because of the crunch time minutes, and also just because of how Detroit played. Like they just really packed in the paint against him, and it's something I've remarked on a bunch this season, but not really treating the Knicks shooters like shooters, which is maybe where maybe that's Landry Shamit's music, and you're gonna talk about him next pod. But that part of it stood out. But Brunson only played 29 minutes in that game, and he had 15 points and 5 assists. The other 3 games against the Pistons, 36 and 5. That was the first game of the year where they blew them out. 14 to 22, 6 of 8 from 3, obviously electric. Next game, 31 points, 10 assists, 11 to 21, 3 of 7 from 3. Then that third game, a little less efficient, but still 31 and 11, 12 for 24 from the field, just 1 for 7 from 3. Like he's mostly like wrecked Detroit. The one caveat to that is I'm trying to remember if Asar Thompson played in that third game. I know he didn't play. I'm pretty sure he didn't play in those first 2 games, and he was back for the 4th game. And that is obviously the guy that is going to be seeing the bulk of the minutes on Brunson. And I think is capable of challenging him because he is a freak athlete. He is 6'7". We saw him block that step back 3 that, or maybe it was off a screen 3 that Brunson took. Like I think his length is going to take some adjusting to. But I do think if the Knicks put shooting on the floor and Detroit is not able to just scrunch in their defense, I don't really see how anyone stops Jalen Brunson. And to that point, his brother, who's an even better athlete ladder than him, Amen Thompson, like Brunson had what, like 43 against him. Like he's capable of being an efficient star against any player in the league. I just think the sum has to be as good as the parts. It doesn't even have to be greater than the parts. It has to be as good as the parts. And the Knicks, Alex, Koo had this stat today on our Locked On NBA squad show. Since January 4th, the Knicks have just the 16th best offense in basketball. Obviously, 15 of those games are without Brunson, but I still think that's notable. And in their last 33 games, I mentioned this one from Prez, negative net rating. So the starters, the offense have all not been great. And I think it falls on Brunson to figure that out. But still one more conversation to have, and it's about the Knicks' other star, and Karl-Anthony Towns. We'll get into him in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to tell you about our good friends over at Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about it. When was the last time you had a service emergency? If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications all through an app on your phone or computer. I love that I don't need to carry 2 phones, unlike Kevin Gates. With Open Phone, I can manage business calls and text from one app, whether I'm at my desk or on the go. My favorite treasure, the shared inbox. Your team can jump into any conversation without missing a beat. The AI call transcripts and summaries save you time and follow-ups and ensure you never lose track of customer interaction. Open Phone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you're switching from another service, Open Phone will even port your existing numbers over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, what's up, guys? We're here to wrap this one up on Locked On Knicks. Alex, I've dominated the conversation. I want to hear your thoughts on Karl-Anthony Towns and what he needs to do to own this series.
I mean, how much of it is up to him, right? I think first thing is they need to use more pick and rolls with him, whether it's with Brunson as the ball handler or with someone else as the ball handler. I feel like as long as Cade is feeling up to it, which I mean, he has a week to heal up. I do feel like, there's been evidence of this by his game log and, the times they've chosen to rest him. But I do feel like he's looked a little hobbled down the stretch of the season, maybe not quite as spry, like on getting up and down the court. I know the knee has been bothering him pretty much the whole season. So maybe that's had something to do with it. But hopefully this next week, treatment and, whatever, Theragunning and and whatever, like cold plunges, whatever, like can get his knee right and get him feeling nice and spry. Because if he's willing to go out there and like start 70-80% of possessions with a pick and let the Knicks work off of that, hopefully, I mean, we've been saying it for weeks, months, but like, and the offensive numbers since the turn of the year just paint the perfect picture. Like their offense has not been as good in this new year. And guess what? Like they stopped going to one of the easy money things that you can do if you have Karl-Anthony Towns on your roster, which is just a quick little pick and pop. Like that will generate so many points. And on top of everything else, I mean, we've seen the Cat, especially from the top of the 3-point line, can be a hell of a passer. If you start drawing Jalen Duren out, who's the guy who's probably the most intimidating that the Pistons can possibly throw at you on the inside, you start drawing him out to the 3-point line, or giving him that choice of like, do I stick with Cat here or do I like defend on the inside? Suddenly Cat's now given this opportunity of like, oh, I either have a relatively wide open three, or I have the vision and we have three great cutting wings that can make a cut along the baseline, or cut in from the other side of the 3-point line or whatever, and get in there and get an easy layup off of a nice Cat pass, which used to be more of a staple for the Knicks. So I think for Cat to really succeed, it's just going to come down to like, is Tibbs and are the Knicks and is Brunson and is everybody willing to kind of commit to just playing a little more like they did early in the season, when it was obvious that they were kind of just like playing with their instincts and just going with what felt right, as they were kind of like learning each other's games and everything. Just go back to that. I don't understand why they ever got away from it, and that's kind of what it's going to take for Cat to be able to take over in this, is like shoot more threes, get outside more, utilize that to then open up the driving lanes once he can tilt the defense, so he can get in there, get those easier layups, force fouls, get dunks, whatever. To me, that it's as simple as that. It's just like, it's almost like in football establishing the run before you establish the pass, but like sort of in reverse, where like, I guess in basketball, like getting inside is almost more like the run, and shooting from three is more like the pass, if you're talking about like what's longer versus shorter, whatever.
Sure.
But in Cat's case, it's like establish the three, establish the pick and pop, and then everything should fall in place from there, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you. And to your point, he took a combined 15 threes in the first two games against Detroit. Shot 7 of 15 from distance. Last game, shot 0 for 1 from 3-point range, right? And a lot of that this season has been teams just deciding to put wings on him. And that is limited. Maybe it shouldn't, because to your point, like he can just shoot over those guys a lot of times, but he's gotten less like open pick and pop threes, because I think most teams made that adjustment. Detroit, interestingly enough, is one of the few teams that has generally not made that adjustment and kept it big on him. So I'm curious if that's something that happens game one, or if that's something that happens later in the series. If Cat comes out and has a dominant game one, like do they switch up their coverage in that sense to try to take those away? But there have been a myriad of issues. I mean, in terms of like getting Cat's volume up from distance, like Jalen Brunson not making simple hook passes. And we saw Cat start to get those easy shots when Campaign was starting at point guard, when Tyler Kolek was starting at point guard, when DeLon Wright was starting at point guard. So I'm hoping Tom Thibodeau and Jalen, and I hope this podcast doesn't come off as me hating on Jalen, because he's been amazing and obviously I love him. But like, I'm hoping Jalen can watch film of that, like when he was out, and say, all right, this has to be an emphasis, but it's not all on him. Like a lot of times Cat is popping below the line. A lot of times, like the Knicks are running their offense and it's working beautifully because someone is staying attached to Cat, and he will just kind of mindlessly drift towards the basket. Like he has to like very consciously like keep his like park behind the 3-point line. So I think there's a lot to be said there. That being said, like he's done well in this matchup all year. 3 games, 24, 11, and 5, 46% from the field, 44 from 3, 83 from the line. We watched him last game. Like there have been times where he just ragdolls Jalen Duren around. I don't think Duren is much of a chance. Isaiah Stewart completely stood him up on one of his drives, and Cat had to settle for a fadeaway. I think if Stewart's on the floor, you really need to lean more into pick and pop and more into Cat's 3-point shooting, and maybe more into his speed, because in terms of just his bull rushes, like Stewart is strong enough and big enough to hold up against that. And then I think some of the psychological factors are important, right? Like this is undoubtedly going to be a hyper physical series. We saw in certainly the last 2 games in my notes, I had stuff like the Knicks are playing hard. Detroit is just playing that much harder. Like the Pistons are kind of the 2020-21 Knicks with maybe even a little more talent on the margins and a little bit more shooting on the margins. Like can Cat keep his head, because again, foul trouble is always an issue. And historically, like, Cat is a bit of a playoff jumper. His efficiency in terms of points per shot attempt as measured by clean the glass. First playoff run, 29th percentile. Second playoff run, 51%, 51st percentile. Third playoff run, a lot better, 72nd percentile. Last year, when he was really, or excuse me, 82nd percentile. Last year, where he was good overall, only 35th percentile, right? He's not been an efficient playoff player. I think if he's not taking a lot of threes, if he's not like setting up those drives to Duren, and if the Knicks aren't surrounding him with shooting and letting Detroit collapse and put two guys on him because Josh Hart is always on the floor, I think it could be a tough series. I think if the Knicks play the right lineups, it could be a really easy series and a great series for Cat, and it could be an easy series for the Knicks in turn.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also something to be said with, I think this is going to be your third point, spoiler to our prior convos, but our convos before the show, but possibly getting Mitchell Robinson involved and finally embracing the too big thing could actually help Cat a lot too, in terms of having a smaller defender on him that he could shoot right over from the outside, which could help him get going. Also, I think having Mitch down low, who is just so much bigger than really anyone that Detroit can throw out there. I know that like Jalen Duren is like physically very imposing looking, but I really think that Mitch could just absolutely dominate him on the glass, because Mitch is just flat out like one of the best rebounders in the NBA, if not the best, like especially on the offensive end rebounder in the NBA. That would just allow you to use all that spacing, have a guy out there who will probably have a matchup where he can shoot right over somebody in Cat, and potentially work really well for you there. Also, maybe opens up a 4-5 pick and roll, which who knows if they even know how to do that, because they just, well, I know that we know that Cat knows how to do it because they did it with Gobert sometimes in Minnesota, but it's just not something that they've ever really experimented with yet on the Knicks, which is a shame. But yeah, at any rate, hopefully, they're willing to look at some stuff like that and find different ways to get Cat involved, because I think it's imperative that he play well, because he is one of the guys that has one of the greatest mismatches, I think, in terms of what he could do against this team versus what, say, a Brunson could do against, as you said, a really talented defender, and a really long and like rangy defender in Thompson. Cat probably has an easier path if they utilize him right to, take over and really be an offensive force in this series, I think.
Yeah, and I think to your point, with both of them out there, you can dominate the glass. Like Detroit, as good as their defense has been, they have not really been a good defensive rebounding team over this 50-game stretch where they've emerged as one of the best teams in the NBA. And Cat, to start the year, was like the best or one of the 2 or 3 best rebounders in the league. To your point, his knee might be affecting him a little bit in that respect, but you combine it with Mitch, who we've noted a bunch of times is the box out king and is so good on the offensive glass. I think you could, I just don't see any answer for Detroit. And if Detroit is forced to play Duren and Stewart together to try to combat that, they've already lost, because then they just don't have enough spacing. So there are a ton of other factors that will decide this series. We're going to talk about 3 of them tomorrow from my buddy to my left, Alex Wolfe. But until next time, he's Alex. I'm Gavin. We'll talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks. And we just wanted to remind you about all the prizes you can win with our Locked On Knicks newsletter. The Knicks are ready for playoff basketball, and Locked On Knicks has you covered every step of the way. Subscribe to the Locked On Knicks podcast newsletter for expert analysis, insider insights, and all the playoff action delivered right to your inbox for free. Plus, as a subscriber, you'll be entered to win one of 3 amazing prizes, including a $2,500 Best Buy gift card, a $300 Game Time gift card, and a $200 Fanatics gift card. It's easy and free to enter. All you have to do is subscribe between April 7th and April 30th, 2025 to be automatically entered to win. So don't miss a moment of the Knicks' hopeful championship run. Join the Locked On Knicks newsletter today. Subscribe today and enter to win by clicking the link in the description. Until next time, we'll see you soon on Locked On Knicks.